Manchester United's biggest problem will not be their manager or their players at the moment. Manchester United's biggest problem is Manchester City and Pep. Nobody ever knew what the West Ham way was, and I think today, and I've been the manager, I couldn't tell you what the West Ham way is.
It feels like it's centre-back management in terms of a bit like Gareth Southgate. I'm worried about what the opposition might do to me rather than what I might do to the opposition.
He was a man at 16. He really was. He was an incredibly strong, physical specimen. But let me tell you, he was really hard work as well. And I would say Vincent Kompany's done, looks as if he's going to go on to be a great coach, but I don't know if they justify getting the Bayern Munich job.
This is Upfront with me, Simon Jordan. I believe there are a lot of vacuous, uninformed, unchallenged opinions out there. I want to get to the bottom line and cut through the nonsense. So on this podcast with William Hill, I'm going to get people with strong views who think they can stand them up under proper scrutiny. There's a good chance I might learn something along the way, but more importantly, so might you. Joining me in today's episode, a respected and constant figure within English football management. Over 2 decades of experience in the dugout, only Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger have overseen more Premier League matches. His managerial CV includes promotions, Europe, Cup finals and Old Trafford. Before ending his most recent chapter securing West Ham's first piece of silverware in over 40 years. David Moyes, welcome to Upfront.
Thanks for having me.
David, nice to see you, mate. Last time I saw you was over a Zoom call where you were admonishing a pundit about his lack of coaching badges whilst he was critiquing football selection.
Yeah, it was a poor answer by me, I have to say.
It was.
But I have to say, someone was speaking as if that they knew the answers, and it's very difficult. Football management, nobody knows all the answers, and I think it's very easy. I've said this to you before. It seems that it's okay to be critical of football managers. That seems to be the thing which is allowed to happen. And I thought to bring up every small piece on Gareth Southgate at the time, who we were talking about, was to say, wait a minute here, Gareth just got England to a semi, a final. I'd have said that for a manager was pretty good success.
Well, we'll get into Gareth Southgate because I want to talk to you about your views on him because context is everything. I share similar views about Southgate being recognised and criticised in equal measure because I do think that any manager that managed England that had the kind of draws and opportunities he had should have achieved these things. But we'll get into him a bit later on. Let's talk about you. When we're doing these shows, David, what we try to do is establish what created the person that we're now talking to, get a bit of background to work out why they are, what they did, and what was the genesis of their career. I mean, you're brought up in the west of Glasgow. Was your team Celtic or Rangers?
Well, I have to tell you that, first of all, I was brought up as a Rangers supporter but played for Celtic. So my club probably is Celtic now, but I was brought up as a Rangers supporter.
Because your father was a coach, wasn't he?
My father was a coach of a very famous amateur team in Glasgow, which had sort of Sir Alex and Asa Hartford and John Wark and people of that era. So I sort of get brought up following his team, and that was sort of how we started. So
was it always football for you?
Football was always for me. It was the only thing I really cared about. But as you're growing up, you never think that you're certainly going to be a manager. I mean, the only thing I wanted to do was be a player.
Yeah.
But I was a keen player. Played for Scotland schoolboys at a level. Played for Scottish under-18, and was so desperate to become an international player.
Right.
And I would have done anything to play for Scotland at the time, and I just couldn't quite make the jump. But actually, if you look back, to be fair, if you look back at the players who I was up against and competing against at that time, it was a fair level of
absolutely.
player.
Given the fact that your father, and we are all sons, and we're all influenced by those that are around us. But what were the philosophies and ideals of football that you first encountered?
When we were younger, I played with Celtic boys teams when I was 13. Celtic were only interested in winning. No, playing well was really important. Style was hugely important.
Yeah.
But winning always came before everything else.
I mean, do you think it's the importance of winning compared to the style of play has changed? Do you think that's a fair observation that people have moved away from you winning to you've got to win in a certain way now?
Yeah, I think you're right, Simon, on that. And I think that it's sometimes quite difficult to explain. You're a pundit who will listen to people phoning you in and speaking to you about different things, about teams. And sometimes you're saying, well, your side are doing great. Why would you what's the problem? But then there'll be another side, we're saying, yeah, your team are doing okay, but maybe not playing as well as we'd like. I think there is a big opinionated world out there on football at the moment. I think there's a lot of changes, things are changing. For example, I'm seeing a lot of incredibly new coaches coming into the Premier League. You know, for example, young coaches getting the Chelsea job where you've probably been in
Maresca,
the
yeah.
you've probably been in the Abramovich era, where you'd have said in that era you'd have never seen that
No,
happening.
just a
You
bona
never
fide
just
copper
so
bottom winners, right?
no, that's right.
Mm.
You know, for example, and I would say Vincent Kompany's done. Looks as if he's going to go into a great coach, but I don't know if they justify getting the Bayern Munich job.
You think?
You know, so to talk suddenly about style.
Yeah.
I feel as if, no, wait a minute here. Should you not be saying, hey, wait a minute, in the whole thing of management and coaching world, it's all gone really upside down. You know, there's no guarantee. So don't start saying it's about the style, or maybe you don't say it's just all about the winning. But ultimately, if you're a coach and you've had a few in your time, if the coach doesn't win, you're probably sacking him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think my style was always based on being attacking. People might not believe that or not say that, but ultimately, I was also saying, if you want to be the best team, you're going to have the best defensive organisation and structure, and football would still prove that as well.
Have you struggled with the change, ostensibly from the media and the fans, not necessarily from football people?
I think there's changes taking place, which actually, if you speak to people of, I put you maybe in our generation and people around that time, I think a lot of them would say, well, this is not happening. No, this is fashion. So, for example, you know, I watch a lot of football. So many mistakes made defensively, goalkeepers giving it, or centre halves playing in their own box and getting caught in the ball. There's a world out there who would say, oh, you would never do that. Why would you even take that on? But yet there's another part of the world out there who say, no, this is fine. Keep making the mistakes. It doesn't matter. This is the way we want to play. So I think there's two completely odd and even there.
It's a fascinating thing, isn't it? I mean, you see the situation at Burnley. I watched Burnley all season at times, and committing acts of self-harm by wanting to play out from the back, giving the opposition goals repeatedly and regularly, getting relegated, everyone saying, well, he stuck to his principles. Burnley are back in the Championship, and he's at Bayern Munich. And I find that a little bit perplexing.
I think it's ridiculous. I think if you're asking me, I'm saying, well, if I'm losing a player because of the way I'm playing, my job to fix it, my job to find another way. I've got to find a solution. If I don't find a solution, then I'll probably be out of work. But to keep doing the same things, I wouldn't say badly or wrongly or not making it right, I can't see how that's...
It's the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same things, expecting a different outcome. Is the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
You end up at Preston. You end up very early in your life as a manager at 34. And I remember, I mean, I bought Palace in 2000. You were, I think, made manager in 98 at Preston. Took them through the divisions. I mean, how did it come about that at that stage you get the Preston job?
So I worked under John Beck and I was on the staff. I eventually became a coach. Gary Peters was his assistant.
Right.
Gary got the job. I became Gary's assistant manager. He was very good. I went on to become the manager. And I remember when I took the job, nobody really wanted me as a manager, the support. Remember, they wanted, and at that time, I think Joe Royal was available. And I remember Ian Rush was available to become the managers. So, but I had a great chairman. A great owner at the time who was really calm, didn't listen to too much, and done what he thought was right, and gave me the job. I didn't take the job initially because I had a player's contract, and I thought, my goodness, if I give this player's contract up just now, then that's me done. So we took them over, and then the following season, I think we missed out in the playoffs to Gillingham. Tony Pulis's teams at Gillingham lost in the playoffs, and then the following year we got them promoted.
You had Beckham playing with you for a while, didn't you?
Yeah.
What was that like?
He was brilliant. Part of the job at that time was to go and look. I know there's so many other ways to see players nowadays, but we were on the road watching players and trying to find. So Man United reserves were playing Aston Villa at Walsall. So we drove down with Gary Peters, and I was playing in the team at the time, but also his assistant. Went down to watch David Beckham playing for Man United reserves. And Gary said, I think we'll take this boy. And I'm saying, don't know if he looks strong enough.
Yeah.
He was a wee, thin, wiry boy. Saying, don't know if he's going to be strong enough for us. I was in the team at the time. So anyway, Gary said, no, we'll take him on loan. Says, and what a decision and what a player and all the things. But he came to us for a month and he was incredible. Took all the corners right away, scored from a free kick. But the biggest thing I remember about David Wenger, that year we went on to win promotion. And we done it at Orient. I remember it was at Orient we won it. And David had gone back to Man United, gone right back into the team after he left us after a month, I think it was. And David came to the game at Orient, came in the dressing room with the players, and that was the biggest thing for me. His sort of humility and
It's a
showing
good
it
thing,
was
isn't it? When good players,
yeah.
when young players, I think it's much underestimated, and often the agents won't be very helpful with it. When you get young players, they can go out down the pyramid, play at lesser football clubs, get away from the environments where there's a different attitude and different outlook, playing men's football rather than playing in the stiff and the resis, not really learning that much.
That's right.
Kane did it, didn't he?
Yeah.
And went out and played at Millwall and other
And he
clubs.
was at Orient and Norwich.
And I think it gives him a different grounding.
That's right.
As I say, I was there at the time and I watched you, and obviously that Preston side that you produced that got lost in the playoffs to get promoted to the Premier League was a good side. It was a decent side, a difficult side to play against. And I think you worked the oracle for Preston. And it brought about an opportunity for you. And it brought about an opportunity to go to Everton. What were your ambitions at that time?
Okay, just before I start that, just says, I was so determined to try and get Preston in the Premier League.
Yeah.
And we lost to Big Sam's Bolton at Cardiff in the final. We came through and I was so desperate to get them. But then we started to get our players taken away, like people like John Mackin taken away. And I started to think, well, there's no way we can rebuild this back up again because we weren't the biggest team. But I have to say to you, I had been offered Sheffield Wednesday, Southampton, Nottingham Forest. I'd met them all, and I do it with respect, and I say it with respect. I wasn't doing it behind people's back, but I was making sure that it wasn't known. I'm only using this. I used to either go to Walter Smith or Sir Alex Ferguson for some advice or some mentoring. So if I had a club came on for me,
well, you couldn't go to Walter Smith about the Everton job, because you were taking it.
But here's the story. So when Walter was losing his job, I went to Walter's house the night I'd been offered the job.
Right.
Walter just been sat in it, and Walter had a house in Lim, and I went and knocked his door in Lim, and he couldn't have been any better. He says, no, you have to take the Everton job and whatnot. But I had not turned down. I'd decided not to take offers to go to quite a few clubs around that time.
Did you feel it was a big step up? Did you feel that the scrutiny and the expectations of you were going to be different? Yeah,
huge step up. Get into the dressing room, and there was David Ginola, Tommy Gravison, Duncan Ferguson. My goodness, when you're a young coach, and I wouldn't say completely unknown because obviously I'd started to build up, but really you get into an environment, you're saying, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to handle it? And obviously Walter Smith was such a good manager, such well liked. It was always going to be difficult to take over from Walter, whether they were in a good position or a bad position. But we got off to a great start. We beat Fulham on the Saturday. David Unsworth scored, and we actually won the 3 or 4 games which was required to keep us up between then and the end of the season.
But how has it changed for you, and how have you changed, for want of a better expression, if you've got to give a player a bollocking? How have you changed from what you might have done 20 years ago to what you now do, given what you've just said about the manner in which players, I don't need you to be specific about players, respond to it?
Sadly, I've hugely changed. I wish I could do it without the baggage that might come from it. You know, a player could phone up their agent and say, hey, you're not, phone the PFA up nowadays. They could do anything if they think that you're a bit over the top.
But what do you mean by over the top? I mean, over the top, we all know what over the top means, which is taking it beyond the reasonable realms of putting somebody in their place.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by over the top? Are you simply telling somebody the truth about their performance, their contribution to an individual session or a game?
Yeah.
Right? That can't be over the top.
No, it's not. It's not, and that's where I don't think it's seen quite as well from the players' side of it. They're not. In the years gone by, players would accept it no problem.
Yeah.
No, we'd have seen. I wouldn't say we don't want to encourage fighting, so it's far from that. But you'd have seen in the days of players saying "fuck off, I'm off the pitch," and or walking off training. That was part of it because there was a level was expected. The managers expected a level, and I still do. You look now at some of the dissentful actions on players, on the pitch. They maybe you're subbing me and they're throwing
Yeah,
their
yeah,
arms up
yeah.
in there, and you're saying, "Well, wait a minute, get inside, and we'll
Mhm.
talk about it." So there's lots of things now which I see being very much different. But I think as a coach, you have to move with the times. I don't think you can stay where I
Mhm.
was. I think you do have to move. You have to find a way.
You have to.
But you have to. But by the way, and I know there's still nothing up with a bit of the hairdryer
Yeah,
treatment.
every now and again.
But also what you're mentioning, because I'm saying I think criticism's correct. If it's unfair, it's not correct.
Correct. I mean, what kind of players? I mean, can you think of any players recently that you had at West Ham that really responded well to being told in no uncertain
hmm
terms where they need to improve?
Declan, I have to say, I would say to Dec, look, you're now taking the captain. You're going to have to take the
Yeah.
hit here at times, and because you're wanting them really to start it a little bit amongst it. Mickey and Tony would tell you we'd stand up and be screaming at each other, but Mick could take it. Mick could
Mm.
take it and wouldn't like it, but then tended to show you a bit of a reaction when you done it.
Did Declan? I mean, there's obviously a lot of observations about Declan, and we'll talk about him perhaps later on. I mean, did he enjoy that role? I mean, in terms of being put in a situation where he's a leader, but also potentially
Mhm,
you being very strong with him as a methodology to concentrate the minds of
mhm.
others.
Yeah, Declan picked up a lot from Mark Noble because Mark Noble was
Right.
maybe one of the older school ones, so he was able to pick up a bit from that. What I would say though was uh, it maybe initially wasn't Declan's. It wasn't really in his
Makeup.
psyche or
Yeah. Yeah.
makeup to
Yeah.
be that sort of person, but I actually think he grew into it. He grew into it as he went along. He became more of a leader, and I think that. Well, I've said many times. I think he'll go on to be captain of England. I don't know. Might be sooner than
Mm.
we think. Might be longer, but I think he'll go on to be captain of England. But he's still got a lot to do to be maybe
Rodri.
Rodri.
Mm.
Rodri is immense at the
Yeah.
moment, and
Mm.
but I think Dec's got capabilities to do that as well. But he's still youthful, which people mustn't forget. And but he grew in, he enjoyed it. He took and actually Dec Dec would take the bait when I was at him a little bit. Dec didn't like it, but I tended to think that I got a little bit extra out of him when I wasn't happy.
Were you surprised? I mean, there was a lot of observations about his performances during the recent Euros in a couple of games. Were you surprised at the Declan Rice that you saw on display?
Well, there was a whole host of people who thought that Declan Rice wasn't going to be worth 100 million. First of all, when he was sold from West Ham,
I'll put my hand out as one of
yeah,
those.
and I actually thought, and people were nearly sniggering at me when I was saying 150 million. Well, if you look at the other players who've joined the Premier League for similar fees, I think Declan is
Yeah.
absolutely been above that. Declan was, and then it was people who were saying as well, he can't score a goal. So Mikel Arteta, to be fair, takes the credit for that because he's got him playing much
Mm.
higher up. I agree. I don't think Declan played well in the Euros, but if you said that, I don't think there was many England players
No,
who came out
no.
with real pass
For any
marks,
credit, yeah.
and it's not that. So I think that for so many good players just to be below it, it was nearly a culmination of maybe more than just one player or anybody
Mhm.
else.
Going back to Everton, I mean, you did something that is now as rare as rocking horse in football management. You stayed somewhere for 11 years, and built longevity. I mean, I knew Bill Kenwright very well, and
Mhm,
I hold Bill with a lot of affection as a
mhm,
man
mhm.
and as a football operator. Was the relationship between you and Bill so pivotal that it built that stability?
Absolutely, Bill was brilliant for any manager. When I joined Everton, and I'm only saying this because just put some context to it. Bill said to me, David, I've only got 5 million to give you every year. I says, fine, Bill, that's okay. I says, but here's the deal. I want you to allow me to treat my players the best I can. I want to be able to take them away on trips. I want to be able to take them to the best hotels. That's the deal. Shook your hand. And I says, another thing is, and don't take away any of the best players. And we shook hands on it. And I used to always talk about, well, I lost. I always used to talk to Bill about, and you probably heard him saying about, always take it. And nobody probably understands how bad it is for a manager when they lose. And most weeks, don't know how many games we've got in in football in general, in 90 games or something, there'll be 60 or 70 managers who, what I would say, go to the dark room, pull the curtains, go to bed. because they're so disappointed, so down. That was me. If I lost, I'd go home, pull the curtains, go to bed, wouldn't speak to the wife, you know, and I've got kids and I feel embarrassed about it. But that's where I was to try and get results. Bill was great at making it seem a lot easier.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Wayne Rooney.
Yeah.
Because we're in an age where mercurial talent is finding its way to the surface very quickly. So now we've got Jude Bellingham, we've got Phil Foden, we've got the kid that was playing for Spain the other day, Lamine, and there are, there's always this old mantra, isn't it? If you're good enough, you're old enough. What was a young Wayne Rooney like when you've got that kind of talent or perceived talent? At 16 years of age, he announces himself, doesn't he, in a goal versus Arsenal in 2002. I mean, what do you remember of this so-called wonder kid?
Well, he was an incredible player, but he was a man at 16. He really was. He was an incredibly strong, physical specimen. But let me tell you, he was really hard work as well. Actually, I had a dinner with Wayne in Germany there, and he told me some stories, and I said, my goodness, if the managers knew the stories, what Wayne was like at that age, which I didn't know till he told me, I was covering my eyes and my ears listening to them, some of the stories. But he was an incredible talent. He was from the streets of Liverpool.
How was he hard work?
Tough boy. I don't think he particularly liked authority. And remember when I started this, I was saying is I came a wee bit from a Scottish background, which was quite a tough authoritarian, quite direct, and I wanted to look after Wayne, and I really did. And I was talking to him about it, early days he changed his agent. He went with Paul Stretford.
I was going to mention Stretford,
and he went with Paul Stretford, and he had Pepsi Cola advert or something else, and I was going mad. I'm saying I'm protecting him. And I still use it, and I say, I only had Charlie Nicholas at Celtic, how I was watching how Celtic, and Charlie was a pal. And then I was looking at Giggsy at Man United and how Fergie was sort of operating with Giggsy. Now, I could only think I was a young manager, which probably went on to be Britain's best talent, probably in Wayne Rooney. And I was getting asked to manage him through the early days with the whole world wanting him.
Because you'd have only been there for about 10 months, wouldn't you, when he starts there?
Remember, and going back to it, Walter Smith said to me, says, David, you've got a great talent in the academy. And it's a bit like, you've heard that before. You're saying, oh, well, we'll see him in whenever.
3-4 years time.
But remember, we took Wayne out of school, put him on the bench at Southampton in the first year. But then when we brought him back, he was telling me the other night, as I didn't play him in I think one of the first derby games against Liverpool, he says, I was raging. He says, I was going to come in and shout at you and fight you and whatnot because I didn't. And that was it. And you think this is a 16-year-old boy, so you had someone who was a sort of born winner, challenging, nearly wanted to challenge whoever it was.
How did you respond to that?
At the time, I never really thought about it. How do I respond to it now? I'm saying, I was probably as a manager, I was probably in the same as a manager. I was where I said at the start when I said I had David Ginola and Tommy Griffiths, and I was probably challenging them. They were probably saying, who's this young coach coming in and challenging us to run more or work harder or do something different. So in a different role, I was probably that as a manager. But when I look back at Wayne and where it's come through, I hope that in some ways people would say, hey, he done well for him, because Wayne, we see a lot of boys now going off the rails. You mentioned Yamal, the young boy at Barcelona. If he doesn't get managed correctly and all the right things, he'll have challenges as well.
I mean, are you surprised that he's gone into management? And do you think, as much as you might want to tiptoe around this one, that he will be a good manager?
Well, I think that when I started, I said, what's going to keep you in a job as a football manager is winning.
It's winning games,
So if you take your first job and you don't do so well, you might not get a second job. That is known. So Wayne's fortunate to be back in it. But I'll tell you what, he done not a bad job at Washington.
At DC?
At DC. I think he done quite a good job there, yeah, I do. I think it was a good grounding for him as well. Now the test will be, can he do this? But let's be fair, if I said to you just now, do you really think Plymouth are going to be up there challenging?
No, and they don't think either.
No, they don't. So I think that you've got to say that Wayne's going to have to find a way of accepting defeat and people not saying, but Wayne Rooney's the manager, that means they should be winning. And I actually think that maybe his experience at Birmingham will find out. This will give him the chance to see if he can
Yeah,
get
because
it
I've been
going.
quite critical of Wayne, and I'm not asking you to be so. Let's move you on to a massive decision that comes. 11 years at Everton. On the whole, the performances and achievements at Everton created an opportunity for you, which is arguably the biggest opportunity in football. This Man United, 26 years of a manager, a club that's awoken the moment the Premier League started, become the poster boys for the Premier League, arguably the biggest football club in the world. Was there ever a thought that said, in your mind, maybe I'll wait for the first guy to go in, catch all the flack that comes from a change of management, change of style, change of even significant executive positions with David Gill going, and I'll let this one pass and come back potentially another time when someone else has called a shit of an ownership model and a management model that's changing?
When you say it to me now, I think to myself, why did I never really have that thought process? I never really had the thought process like you've said, and people have told me the same question. My thought at the time was, I'm just getting offered the biggest job. They were champions of England.
Yep.
I'm saying, yeah, Sir Alex done it on his own to me. It wasn't the family. It wasn't anybody
Edwards,
else.
yeah.
It was only
Places,
Sir
yeah.
Alex. So it was nearly direct. And I hadn't thought, and it was Howard Wilkinson said to me about the dynasty of clubs who've got the dynasties, and he mentioned, I think, Don Revie, and I think he mentioned Sir Bobby, even Coffey.
Right.
And, sorry?
What you mean legacy managers?
Yes,
Yeah.
And he said, none of them, the managers who come in next to
Followed it afterwards.
followed any success. But I'm still probably bold enough to say, no, I was going to, by that time I was saying, no, I'll take it on. Our Everton team had done so well, we'd been challenged. We just finished above Liverpool 2 years in a row. We'd beaten Man United in a semi-final at Wembley. We were challenging the top teams. So I didn't see why I shouldn't attempt to take the next step. And actually, what you said sounds right, but in the position at the time, I thought, no. And my idea was not to change anything what Sir Alex done. But nobody can be the same.
No.
And actually, it's strange enough, I think it was the people at the club changed when Sir Alex left as much as anything, as me coming in. And it was a difficult decision. Not a difficult decision, but I will tell you, as myself and Bill, it was probably, if you said to me, going back to Bill Kenwright, it was probably the biggest disappointing time I had with Bill, because I was so tight with Bill. And I always told Bill if something was going on, I would say to him, but it's when Sir Alex said to me he was retiring, I went, my goodness, Sir Alex Ferguson retiring, that is monumental. It was never, I thought that was more monumental than me getting the job. And he says, you can't tell, MD. And the only person I could tell was my wife. And from that point of view, I found not telling Bill the hardest thing.
Right.
And then when I didn't do it and it sort of broke through bits of the newspaper, I felt so bad that I hadn't told Bill the truth, because I had such a good relationship with him.
If you took you back again now with a little bit of knowledge, not what was going to happen after 10 months, but the circumstances of where United might have been, would you do the same again?
I would hope I would stand back. It's a bit like, as we get older, we think a bit more and we go a bit deeper into it. I think at the time I had done 11 years at Everton and I thought I didn't want to overstay my welcome.
Right.
I used to say that. And I also thought that at Everton, the glass ceiling, we were struggling to get into the top four. And we probably didn't have the money. We hadn't got a new investment yet, really, to take us on. So when the job came up, I said, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay at Everton longer, or am I going to go and take Manchester United? So I think there was other ways you could look at it. I think the way it's getting put is makes you say, why would you take it when you know that it would be so difficult? Sir Alex was there. David Gill was leaving, who was a huge part as well. But both of them had sort of reassured me, and we did. We met probably once a month. We'd have a bit of dinner at night. We'd discuss what was going on with Sir Alex and whatnot at the time. So that's what I'm saying is my idea was not to change everything which Sir Alex had done.
But you took out all the staff, though, didn't you?
Sorry?
You took out all the backroom staff.
Yeah, but the backroom staff was a little bit difficult, and behind everything's a long story, and I could tell you, not a long story, but I could tell you, no, I didn't give Mickey Phelan the job, but offered Ronnie Mullenstein the role, who said he was staying, then changed his mind.
Right.
And changed his mind because I think he had a chance of taking the Fulham job, which he took.
Okay.
So that I had already told Mickey that I was going to change. So that meant then that, and it was funny at that time when I was speaking to Sir Alex, I was speaking to Walter Smith, and Walter said to me, "No, David, you should bring in all your own staff, bring in
Right.
your own people." So that in itself could be something which you say, hey, maybe staff wasn't the right ones with the wrong decisions. It's always easy after the event.
Of course it is.
But
So the answer to the question is
Yeah.
really, if the opportunity came again around again, you'd still do the same thing and take the job.
do the same thing
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
of course.
When you look at the state of United, when you walk through the door, because a lot's been made, again, with the benefit of hindsight, about Ferguson working the Oracle to get this 2012-2013 side to win this Premier League. It was on its last legs. And you were handed over, not so much a pup, but not quite the United that people think that you might have been handed over. Did you think that you did enough to prepare yourself for what you were inheriting, and also the magnitude and scale of the United job? Because it's like no other job, is it? Were you prepared for all that?
I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it to be as severe as it was. What you said, everything was ultimate as far as people, news, you name it, everybody was there. But I was prepared because I was ready to take. I was at a good
Take that
age.
step.
Yeah, but I have to say is, probably looking back, I'm looking back at the team and the team that won it. And I remember the summer, like Manchester United didn't take me because I was coming out of contract. They could have taken me a month earlier.
Yeah.
So when we finished on, I can't remember what date we finished at, May the 10th or May the 12th. They could have taken me in, but chose not to take me I think it was the 1st of July when the contracts changed. So there was a period where I should have probably been involved writing at Man United at the time, didn't take me then. And because of that, it was a really late start. We started first day of pre-season, but not allowed in at the training ground at Carrington to do the work prior to going in to take the job.
Your first window doesn't seem to be a particularly successful. In fact, it looks like a very poor transfer window.
Yeah.
But you've gone and signed 3 players: Varela, Sadijanko, and the boy that you know at Everton, Fellaini.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of transfer window you must have been anticipating.
Well, let me say, the first 2 players I knew very little about.
Yeah.
Varela. It's a bit like, we talked earlier about transfers and how you do it, but there'll be young players getting bought into the club where the scouts are recommending it'll go into our department. Fellaini was the one who we brought in right on deadline day.
Yeah.
So in truth, we had, as far as it goes for mass signings, we had a terrible window.
Why?
Well, here's the reason why. I'll tell you what I tell you is, Cesc Fabregas was, both me and Alex Ferguson spoke, and he says Cesc Fabregas, and we spoke about him, says, yeah, we'd bring Cesc Fabregas in. So I had spoke to Cesc, and I was mentioned to you, I saw him in Germany. Cesc had been out the team at Barcelona at the end of the season. So we spoke to Cesc, and Cesc had agreed if he hadn't been selected in the first game for Barcelona, he would join Manchester United. We'd get him to come. And so he was going to be the signing. And
who's working with you on all this?
Who was working?
Yeah,
inside the staff. No, Ed was involved in it as well, and everybody was involved. Everybody was involved in it. The recruitment staff, everybody else. And the other part then was, I wanted Gareth Bale, and I had thought, Manchester United always remind me of, we mentioned like Giggsy and Beckham, and Man United had great wide players and wingers at the time, Kanchelski, and you go on and on the history of what Man United stood for, and a bit like talking about style and what teams had. I thought Gareth Bale. So we had made a bigger offer to Tottenham, made bigger offers to him, his agent, they all done it. We had a helicopter waiting to try and get Gareth Bale, and I saw Gareth at the final. It was the first time I'd seen Gareth Bale for such a long time, and in the end they were 2 targets really. And in truth, we had also wanted to sign Leighton Baines, but going back to Everton, which we'll mention Fellaini in a minute or two, was so difficult because of Bill, and Bill was still angry that I hadn't dealt with things correctly. But we were trying to get Cesc Fabregas and Gareth Bale, and both in the end, it fell through. Gareth Bale had his heart set on going to Real Madrid, and I ended up I couldn't change it. So our transfer window became a very poor looking one.
Do you think that you were given the right amount of support in that summer to be able to come through the door? I don't know why they're fanning about putting you on July 1st, but there must have been reasons. Maybe that was to do with Everton. But were you given the right amount of support to be able to help you at least get your feet under the table?
I believe I was given good support, but let's remember is Ed Woodward had to take over from probably one of the best operators in football, and David Gill.
I know David,
Yeah, and I think that was another. So part of it, Ed was learning on the job as well. So he was new to the situation, and that's why I was still in close contact with Sir Alex and David, because they were still saying what they thought to me from one side, and there was a little bit from Ed as well in their side. But Ed was new to the job as well. But I was actually hoping that I would in some way be able to help Ed and how he was doing his work and pull it together, because I felt the more experienced one at the time than what Ed was in the role he was going into.
Can I ask you about how you approached the task of managing Man United? Because there are various quotes attributed to circumstances surrounding being involved with Man United. Rio Ferdinand talked about you, which was that you seemed to be predominantly focused on the opposition, and that his experiences of Man United was that we are the opposition, we're the team. Patrice Evra talks about you made a big mistake coming in the first few days, where you talked about you're already winners. Together we're going to win, or learn to win together, as if it was their responsibility to show you how to be a winner. And I heard things, the stuff of mythology in football, which is that there would be sessions at United and you would say to the players, this is not how we did it at Everton. And they would turn around and say, well, fucking hell, what's that got to do with the price of cheese? This is Man United.
Yeah. Well, I found it really difficult, Simon, when I lost the job, because there was so many stories which were untrue. It was difficult because I'm saying, I can't stop these stories coming out. There was one about me banning chips. You know, Man United used to have chips on a Friday night, and I did. So that was true. But I never thought. I think if we asked people probably in the business, they'd have probably said, "What are you doing having chips on a Friday night anyway?" For example. So there was some things which you would say I did do it, but it was probably for the right reasons. I think that in the main, I had the setup what I went in with was a setup which had been successful at Everton. I wasn't. As I said, I was trying not to change Alex's.
But this is
design.
a different, David, relative success at Everton.
Yeah.
Wonderful success at Everton for a club that's got budgets that are a fraction of these sort of size of clubs, fraction of the scrutiny, getting them to be an average position under your tenure of 10, 11 years of 7th and putting them in 4th and 5th and 6th is remarkable achievements. But this isn't Everton. This is Manchester United.
But this was the same when Sir Alex took the job from Aberdeen.
But that's a different time.
Level.
86.
It wasn't where Sir Alex had the time. So you've got to remember, Manchester United had great values, brilliant values. We support the manager. We bring young players through. They used to do all the correct things. And I'm saying this suits me because, and at the time the Glazers were saying, no problem, David. We've been given a lot of criticism. No hurry. We'll take your time and all that. So I didn't feel under pressure in any way. So. Even when we weren't doing so well, obviously I had a team of quite a few older players which were due to be turned around. They'd just won the league. And while Man United were winning the league, the likes of Man City and Liverpool were out strengthening as well. And we just talked about, probably in truth, if there was one thing where I really go, it was the signings in the summertime that we didn't really make good enough signings at that in that transfer window.
But do you think, not to hit you over the head with this, and I know that you're saying that the sound bites are half the story, but these are specifics from senior players about your approach to the Man United job and your style of management. When you look back at that and you think, did I approach it the right way? Did I understand the scale and the expectation of this football club, and subsequently approach it in the right way to be able to harness what that was already there?
Well, let me answer. By the way, Rio in lots of ways is right. I've got to say, I've got no shame in saying, no. Today, when you've got different coaches, and you're saying, what's their methodology? Yeah, I was quite well focused on the opposition. Don't think there's any shame in that whatsoever. Now, that might not have quite suited Manchester United, because I was always finding ways of trying to either stop the opposition, beat the opposition. So I see that as actually a coaching strength rather than a weakness. Now, I understand that maybe the manager before didn't work with that structure, so that might have been where the change came. But I'd no shame in saying, yeah, quite often I'd always be studying the opposition, always trying to find out if I could find weaknesses in how we could score, or saying, hey, their strengths come from here or here. What would we do to stop it? So no, I've got no shame in that at all.
Is that a mentality though, David? Because there is an observation about you and the way that you play.
Hmm.
And I agree that you focus on the opponent. I agree, well, not focus, I agree that you are aware of the opposition.
Hmm.
But I'm of the kind of mentality which is I want the opposition to be worried about me,
Hmm.
and I want to be accentuating our strengths.
Yeah,
And
but
I
you're
want
doing
to,
that as well as the other bit as well.
right.
Mhm.
Do you think you got that balance right? Do you think throughout your career you've got that balance right? Because I look at
Yeah.
even at Everton's side,
Yeah.
let me just follow this point through and you can
Mhm.
put me in my place. Even the Everton side that finished
Mhm.
fourth in the league
Mhm.
scored 45 goals
Mhm.
against conceding 44 goals.
Mhm.
So it doesn't feel to me that your
Yeah.
brand of football
Yeah.
and your thought processes
Mhm.
are dynamic. It feels like, and I'm going to
Mhm.
say it, and you probably won't like it. It feels like it's centre back management
Mhm.
in terms of a bit like Gareth Southgate. I'm
Mhm.
worried about what the opposition
Yeah.
might do to me rather than what I might do to
Yeah.
the opposition.
I've actually got no shame in that whatsoever. I said it to, but I've came from right at the start. I've come from a really attacking culture. No, there's nothing. No good wingers, crosses in the box. I've always, if you said to me what always, the bit I would always go to the players would say, don't bore me. I want to be excited by the football.
Right,
So don't bore me. Now, you might say, well, hey, a lot of your teams have bored me, and that might well be the case.
right.
But there'll be a lot of games I might have bored people but got a result. And that in the end was probably me moving on and staying in the industry long enough. But I understand what you're saying is when you manage Everton, if you manage Manchester United, you have to have a bit of flair and ability about it. But that comes from what you said is you buy in the better flair, you buy in the better players to do that as well, which adds to what you've got. But uh, I think there's a lot of teams in the Premier League would like a manager who's going to keep them up round sixth, seventh in the league.
Yeah.
Now, I get your point. I think there's a big thing about the style at the moment, but really, and I'm saying it, and it's hard because I feel as if I'm having to defend myself, which I've had to do in other things.
Yeah.
Defend myself in a way to say it's not. If you said to me, I'm only interested in attacking and showing that, but I'm also really interested in making sure I don't allow your team to
Mhm.
score goals because that is part of the game as well.
When the wheels are coming off at United, or metaphorically the wheels are coming off, how does that world feel like for you? Did you feel like it was coming in on you? Ferguson talked about as he watched the results deteriorate, he was watching the pressure build
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that kind of feeling of impending doom coming your
Mhm.
way. How are you feeling inside this bubble
Yeah.
that is unique to
Mhm.
Manchester United?
Let me tell you, it was huge, huge pressure. I couldn't quite get the stories in a bit. We said at the start about, when you give criticism, we said it's correct. There's no problem getting criticism. If it's unfair, then then that's not right, and you want a platform to be able to say
Mm,
something back about it. I thought there was a lot of the criticism, the stuff that was getting talked about was unfair. But while I was not getting the results Manchester United were expecting, then obviously that criticism was fair. But we were quarter-finalists in the Champions League. We were just below the bottom, but the minute I lost my job, the minute we couldn't qualify for the
yeah.
Champions League. But that isn't the criteria for many of the managers now.
Hmm.
No, it's a difference. So it's a difference. So
Hmm.
I had to follow, as you said, rightly or wrongly, I had to follow probably the best manager we've ever known, and then have to keep up. Now we were behind that, but we're still. It was up until a while ago. I don't think Manchester United reached the quarter final of the Champions League for a long, long
So,
time.
so by definition, you mentioned it. How do you compare the job that you did at United in the 10 months that you had to what's followed you?
I think that some of the people have done great jobs. I think Jose Mourinho done a brilliant job. I
Hmm.
really do. I think Eric's fighting it, but I think that Eric's doing well to stay with it because what we talked about, the level of pressure you've got to put up with, the stories, what's going on. And actually, sometimes the players, it's an easy thing for players to use as excuses. Easy to use the manager as the excuse. You know, players at Manchester United, and you talked about, they have got an unbelievable winning culture inside the building, or they did
Or they
have,
had, yeah.
or they had. When we went in, Pat Evra, Vidic, Rio, Wayne, no, boy, oh boy, the manager there hardly needed to say anything because they knew their standards themselves. So those players themselves will know, you know, if they reach their standards as well, whether the manager was in or not. But overall, Manchester United's biggest problem will not be their manager or their players at the moment. Manchester United's biggest problem is Manchester City and Pep.
Yeah. I mean, I find myself in a strange view on Ten Hag because I have to say, and new managers do speak sometimes in double speak, some of the drivel that I've heard come out of his mouth over the last 12 months loses my regard for him. I think it's very difficult to manage Man United. I think it's an incredibly difficult job. But then again, you boys get paid a lot of money. And if you're average, you shouldn't be in Man United's job in the first place anyway. But do you agree with him when he talks himself? You mentioned Pep, that he's had the most impact in the last 2 years besides Pep.
Well, I think in the last 2 years he's had to fight a battle to stay. By the way, he's won a couple of trophies as well.
Yeah,
which
League Cup and FA Cup,
let's not go away from that. You know, if he hadn't won them, then folk would be going mad. But now he's won them, folk really don't want to talk about it. So people should. So I admire him for his determination to fight back against it. I mean, because look, there was a situation in the summer, you know, where there was a lot of talk about other people talking about his job. I actually disagree with that in the management world. I think it's a horrible position to put the manager in. Nobody'd like to be put in that position. I think he's done it with incredible dignity, and he's come back and he's challenging, he's fighting again because he wants to make it right.
Do you think back at your time as United as a failure?
From me, yes.
Yeah.
Mine, if I've got any regrets in my career, that I get given the biggest job in world football and I couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
So that's I'll always, when my time is to go, I'll always have that as time.
Oh, let me be clear.
Yeah.
I think you were harshly treated. I think you were a product of your time. I think it all flows back to the beginning of the conversation about who you immediately followed, what the expectation was, and the landscape.
Yeah.
And I think that judging by what's gone on since, and judging by my view of your career, I think that was an unfair set of circumstances, and everything should have been baked into their thinking. Change of management. When you change managers that have been somewhere for 26 years or 21 years in Wenger's case at Arsenal, you're going to have a period of time where maybe it just doesn't flow and the continuity isn't there. And I think that they should have had more wherewithal to stay with you. So I'm not because you're sat opposite me. I've said it in the media anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's...
You know, the thing for me, Simon, in that is to say is Manchester United had a history. They prided themselves on, you know, doing things correctly.
Yeah.
The idea was we play young players, we put young players in the team, you know, we develop our own young players. But now and again, we'll go and buy the most expensive player because we want them for the team. So, for example, Eric Cantona over the years, you know.
Rio Ferdinand.
So they would do that. But I thought that I really liked their principles at United at the time, and I just sensed that some of them had changed.
You go through a period post-United where it's been described as a redemptive period. I think you made some strange decisions going to Sociedad and going to Sunderland. I mean, did you feel that you were in a rebuild phase now?
Yeah, I was at that period. And actually, you know, so the Sociedad thing, I have to say, was a great situation. I loved it and lots of really good things. But if I jumped to Sunderland, when I'd lost the job at Sociedad, which was around about the November time. When I came back, I was out there for about a year, and I came back. The summertime came around, and I had met. So I remember I was at the LMA dinner. So I had a meeting. I met Dermot Desmond to take the Celtic job. And in the afternoon, I was meeting Moshiri to take the Everton job. I had to give Celtic an answer really quickly because they were going to employ somebody else who went on to be Brendan Rodgers, who done incredible, great job. But I came away from meeting Everton thinking that I'm going to take the Everton job, I'm going to get the Everton job. But things were done slowly, and they eventually appointed Ronald Koeman. Yeah. So I lost out on the Celtic and Everton job. So people might say, so you jumped to Sunderland. But this time, Big Sam was still the Sunderland manager. It was only slightly after Big Sam got offered the England job, and the Sunderland job became vacant. And actually, someone who I knew quite well was Martin Bain, who was the CEO there, and I wasn't going to work. What was I going to do? So I thought, well, I'm going to take the Sunderland job. Big Sam's just kept him up. I'll do the same. But it became a really, really difficult job. And by the way, it's a great club, but it became a really difficult job.
You end up taking a job at West Ham under a strange dynamic for you. And I admire you for doing it because you backed yourself. But you took a 6-month gig with West Ham, and the job description was to keep them in the Premier League, I suspect.
Yeah, was.
You kept them in the division. Did you expect to be kept on?
Yeah, I did. I was having to find a way of coming back and prove myself again, and I needed somewhere to do it. And you're right, Sunderland, I didn't do it. We got relegated. I was really disappointed with that. Sociedad was slightly different, but that's another story. Yeah. But going on to West Ham. So when we got the job and we kept him up, and I remember we won it. We won at Leicester City. I think it was Lanzini and Noble scored against Leicester City. And I remember, and I went back home to my home up north, and we had the Sunday off. And I was walking around a call from David Sullivan, and I remember him saying to me, he says, David, we've got somebody else in mind. I thought, panic. And actually, our last game of the season was Everton at home. We still had Everton at home to play in the last game of the season. And we beat Everton as well. And we actually probably were safe by 4 or 5 points, I think, or more possibly. And I was amazed that actually the final game was obviously on the Sunday. And by the Monday morning, they said, no, David, we're going to go and take somebody else.
Well, this is what he said. And I wondered what reaction it invoked in you when he said it. I mean, because David can be clumsy. We feel that it's right to move in a different direction. We aim to appoint a high caliber figure. So what does that make you then? Chopped liver?
Yeah, well, that's it. But you know what I do think about it is, see, when he came back for me, it maybe took 2 parties to say he came back for me, and I thought, normally when you say those sort of things, you don't go back for the manager. Yeah. But something in there which made me think that he did. But the truth is, which is, I was in Germany agreeing to join Everton when David Sullivan contacted me the second time to become West Ham manager. And the only reason I didn't become the Everton manager then was because Carlo Ancelotti gets sacked, and the next day, the day before I had been with Everton and agreeing the deal, they took Carlo Ancelotti at the last minute, which left it open for me to go back to West Ham, or I would have been at Everton.
But a lot's made of West Ham and the way that they play, and this legacy going back to 1966 of who won the World Cup, their players. And Sam Allardyce coming up against that backdrop when he took them out of the Championship, when they got relegated, when they had all those players like Mascherano and Tevez that had been part of the side that left and they got relegated. Do you know what the West Ham way is, by the way?
No, it's funny you saying that. Last week I played in Sir Alex Ferguson Charity Day, and Sir Alex was telling me the story about John Lyall.
Yeah.
He was telling me the story about John Lyall, and he says, I went to John Lyall's funeral as well, and he was talking. He said that, John Lyall said, no, Sir Alex had said, what the West Ham way? What is it? He says, nobody ever knew what the West Ham way was, and I think today, and I've been the manager, I couldn't tell you what the West Ham way is. I don't think any generationally. Obviously, they're referring back to Bobby Moore, etc. In that era. So I think even John Lyall and Sir Alex couldn't work out what the West Ham was. Never mind all the other managers that have come between that. So yeah, you had that to live up to. But I agree. I think even my period, and we're talking about, we've talked a lot here about our generation of football, and we've been in it for quite a few decades and through it. I can't really remember West Ham having a better period than what they've had in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, statistics will prove that, because you won a tournament that West Ham hadn't won anything for 40 years. You finished 9th. The year before, you won a European competition. The year before that, you got deep into the European competition. Where should West Ham be finishing?
I think West Ham will be bobbing round about the middle of the table. I think that would be probably what it is. And I do think that it's a club. To be fair, we've spent, but you have to look at the money we've actually brought in, and we've just sold British record player. we can argue, I think he's worth 150 and Arsenal
whatever,
still owe me another 50.
yeah.
Or you can say that, so for example, that in itself was an unbelievable deal. You know, and actually the players who were brought in and moved on again. So recently we've had to do one or two, but we've got just about the value back for them. You know, it's not as if we've sort of let them go for nothing. So the money that West Ham have brought in on sales has been pretty good over the years as well, and well done by the club, I have to say. You know, it's they've done that, and that's allowing us to keep challenging the top teams. But if you said to me that after about to avoid relegation, that we were going to finish in Europe and finish sixth, you'd have said there's not a chance. That nowadays, Simon, as you'll know, if you were a team who were fourth from bottom and you just avoid relegation, you're saying, but next year, do you know something? Your team's going to be in Europe. You would say, no way. The money we've taken in from the European games is, you have to remember, 3 years in Europe, back in Europe, the extra games. We were, I think, last year maybe only Real Madrid played more games than us, and Man City possibly.
So basically what you're saying is 9th and 6th is pretty significant, and there should be a bit more gratitude about it.
Well, I do. I would say that, you know, I think there was a bit of underappreciation, but not necessarily from inside the club. Inside the club, I think was quite aware of where it's
because
been.
how would you describe the way that you play? Because the constant criticism that I seem to hear from the vociferous West Ham fans that have their right to their opinion, they pay their money, right? Whether we agree with it or not is a different matter. And I was always in your camp going, well, hold on, 6th in the league, 9th in the league, upper echelons of the Premier League, and also competing deep in European competitions. Albeit I did parody the Europa League and say it was a bit of a Mickey Mouse Cup. I'm sure you won't agree with me. How would you describe your style of play?
I've always found it very difficult to say, because I want to play to win. And that you might say, well, that's too simplistic, because everybody would say that. I'm saying I want to attack. I want to be really aggressive. By the way, if I had my way, I'd be a really, really hard pressing team. But maybe the question back would be to say, David, didn't you do a brilliant job with the players you've got for the style you had to play to get results, to get so far in 3 European competitions to be? Now, some people in the business would definitely look at it that way. But if it's only to do with the word style, what you need an explanation on, I think if that could be put aside, you would say, my goodness.
Achievement-wise, absolutely. But there is a balance in there. There's always a trade-off.
Yeah.
You know, you're in an entertainment business. And I'm curious because there were players that you bought, like Paqueta and Kudos and other players that were in that side that were more flair players. But your team last year came out with possession stats that were only behind sides that were almost relegated.
I agree.
So and again, this is not trying to draw confrontation, but I speak to people like Souness who say Moyes made a decision to play a certain way, even though he had other players in that team that previously he might not have had the ability to have, that could have played a different way, and he knew that decision was beginning to find people being critical of it. So what do you say when you hear that?
I think that there's been an issue which has been sort of, the club must have thought about, maybe we want the style to be different, but they thought that.
But you'd have known that, wouldn't you?
Sorry?
You'd have known that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but I didn't sense it. I wasn't picking anything up. I mean, obviously, if you're an owner, you're exactly right. We are in the entertainment business. We need to try and score goals. We need to try and, but also, I was reading a piece, I don't know if you read this a few weeks ago, not a few weeks ago, now certainly a few months ago, where Simeone was talking about, he was actually saying, isn't it shameful the amount of goals we're getting conceded in the Premier League? Now, Simeone would be probably one of the best coaches, if not, but maybe
dark arts for start,
dark arts, really good. But yet it wouldn't be acknowledged. So I'm hoping that how I play and what I do will be acknowledged. And in truth, I probably wouldn't have had over 1,000 games here or there if people didn't say, hey, by the way, I'm having a bit of that, because we want the winning, we want the consistency, we want the sort of preparation, we want the professionalism from it. And I think we give all that. But there's a but now that people are saying, no, we want this to look a little bit more sexy than what you've done before. So
can you do that?
Yeah, I have to do that now.
Will you do that?
And let's be fair, no. So what is sexy now? Is it so you want the boys playing from the back? So we would do that. Maybe you don't have quite the best central defenders to do it. So does that mean that you still do it and you get it wrong? So I actually think I've watched Jose Mourinho's teams quite a bit now. I don't think Jose's get caught up too much in the demands, and I'm not saying from you personally or the demands
No,
from
no, no.
people. I think Jose Mourinho's saying, no, I'm sticking to my principles,
Yeah.
what I do, and I'm a bit the same. By the way, what we talked right at the start,
But he's
adaptable,
not
changeable.
working his way up again, though,
No,
David, is
no,
it? He's going
no.
downwards now,
And to be
sideways.
fair,
And I'm a huge Mourinho admirer.
I'm probably saying
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily looking to climb the ladder and go that at the moment. I really enjoy my job at West Ham. It was the right time for me to leave.
Was it your choice or theirs?
It was probably more, I've got to say it was a shared one, because what you said was correct. Is we beat Arsenal at the Emirates, and it was in, I think it was the 28th of December, 28th, or it might have been the 1st of January. I think it was 28th of December, we beat Arsenal at the Emirates, and the club had offered me a 2-year contract. And
I remember.
yeah, they offered me a 2-year contract. But I was delaying, partly because I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay, partly for family reasons. My wife was up north, and also because of that little bit, we felt that there was a group which was certainly, I felt, were underappreciating what I was doing at West Ham. Some supporters. But hey.
So, in a hypothetical scenario, a third time round, and Lopetegui doesn't quite hit the mark, would you go back and bail him out again?
I don't know. Do you know what I want to do at the moment, Simon, is I want to try and enjoy myself a bit. I've done it so long, and I've had periods out of football as well. But we're speaking last night.
You're only 61.
Yeah, I'm 61. Oh. And do you know something is, and why I'm bringing it, last night I went to see Bruce Springsteen in concert. He's 74, I think it is, they said, and he was unbelievable. And it actually was inspiring, because I'm thinking, my goodness, this man's still doing it, still hard at it. But I've got to say, I don't know if I want to be, and I'm saying it with respect to one of my really good friends in football, I don't know if I want to be like Roy, where I get to a stage where I'm saying I'm keeping it going too long.
Yeah. But you're a long way from that. You're 61 years of age. You've probably got another good 10 years of being very, very motivated and enthusiastic.
If I can keep driving and get the right place, and you'll know what better than them days, we're looking at a world now of owners coming into at football clubs, and I'm saying, what sort of, so what sort of owner were you, Simon? Were you one who was, would you give the manager a bit of stick on the phone, or would you be shouting from the director's box?
Neither.
Or would you be rushing down into the dressing room?
Neither.
Good.
None of the above.
I'm thrilled to hear it.
Did it once when I was about 12, when I walked into the dressing room after a game, because I was so disgusted with the performance of the players, told the players, and then realised, I was actually supporting the manager, then realised that actually what I've done is undermine the manager, because the moment the chairman walks in the dressing room, the players are thinking he's going to be getting his coat soon. Yeah. My champion was my manager.
Very good.
I believe that's the right way to be. Who do you admire from a coaching perspective? You've spoken about Pep and the transformational effect that he's had, and obviously having inordinate amounts of money helps you have transformation, but he has been remarkable. So when you're looking at the landscape of managers, who do you admire?
In my generation, I hugely looked up to Sir Alex.
Yeah.
But really, when you go into the depth and you speak to people, Sir Alex wasn't a coach. So going back to the bit we said about maybe, I believe you have to earn your stripes and be a coach. I think that's the way you need to be to sort of earn the players' respect probably at the start. I still think that Sir Alex would be the one you'd say, he could come up, but he could pick the teams and manage the players. His management of players, I hear bits and I hear some stories and whatnot, must be unbelievable, in how he done it. I think Pep nowadays, and because I'll tell you why, is I think it's much harder behind the scenes with the players than what it was in years gone by. Bits like players unhappy, and I don't think we have a culture in the world of football where we have, maybe drinking but we've got other things going on. Players are wanting more time off. They've
got more opinions. They've got more cash. They've got more freedom.
They can take off in a private plane, without you knowing, and be somewhere else and not back in. You've also got many, many more games. You've got bigger squads to deal with as a coach. I admire Pep that he's been able to manage that squad, those players,
and impose his will,
and impose it, and actually say, no, this is the way you're doing it. If you're not doing it this way,
you don't play it.
Then you don't play.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's many. Now, years gone by, there's some greats who could have done that.
Comes from winning, though, doesn't it?
Comes from winning, definitely, because the players want to be part of a winning culture. They don't want to go somewhere else where it's not. and I definitely see it. So Pep in many ways is now becoming for me is how his management is going. No, he's undoubtedly a top coach, but I'm now looking and saying the guy must be an incredibly good manager. I don't know him that well enough to comment, but that's just the feeling I get. And I look at Jurgen Klopp, who's just left, and I think to myself, you know, how well's he done that he could stimulate in the way that Liverpool, no, he called it sort of hard rock, didn't he? In the way they played.
Roll, heavy rock,
And to do that for 7 years, was it? He done it in Liverpool.
See, I enjoy watching Liverpool. I mean, with all due respect to Manchester City, I enjoy watching Liverpool's brand of football more than I enjoy watching Man City because it feels more dynamic, it feels more feral, it feels more up an atom. Whereas Man City is a process of beautiful football wearing you down till you almost concede.
Yeah, but there you go. And this is the thing about style now we're saying is, and I'm not saying it's Liverpool hard action, loads of endeavour, but style to it as well. You know, if we're going to have a Premier League, we're all going to say, hey, we've got 20 Pep managers in the league, then I think we're going to say, my goodness, we're going to have to, a lot of you will be going to make a few cups of tea at different times, and not just because, but the managers, but Pep has been the one who's, you can see the drip feed of people who've worked under.
Do you like Arteta? One of your protégés?
Yeah, I couldn't believe the criticism Mikel was getting. I think he won the Charity Shield, then they won the FA Cup, and then the Charity Shield, and I thought, imagine getting into a club and winning 2. I won the Charity Shield at Manchester United. He'd gone in and done that, and I thought, what a start! But yet there was still a level of criticism, which, and I'm saying, I can't see how this is going there. Big jobs.
It's the big jobs, mate. You've managed Man United, you managed Arsenal, you've managed Liverpool.
And I'm saying, and he has done a brilliant job. Hey, by the way, there's a lot of, I know Mikel, he was sort of single-minded.
Yeah.
He was great for me. We sold him to Arsenal as well. I've got a good relationship with Mikel, always have done. But no, he's making his own way in football. And let's be fair, if you're looking around now, Mikel's looking as if he's going to be one of
he's the only challenger at the moment,
one of the elite coaches in world football.
What's next for you?
Some time off still. I really enjoyed. I've done some work at the Euros, which I enjoyed. Bit of UEFA stuff, bit of stuff for BBC, which I enjoyed.
But you want to get back in, don't you?
Yeah, I don't want to be, but I want to get back in when I think something's right, or I'll do it. But at the moment, I still want to take a breather. There's nothing. I have to say, I've had some really interesting opportunities. I wouldn't call them offers, opportunities, which I've said no to at the moment. But who knows what's coming along? I'm not saying that I'm retiring, but in the same breath, I wouldn't be turning around and saying I'm jumping through hoops to get back into it tomorrow.
What about international management?
Possibly, but I don't know how you do international management. I need to speak to somebody like Gareth Southgate. I need to speak to somebody like Steve Clarke. I need to speak to people, Roberto Martinez, and find out how it works. Mine's been a day-to-day job, so at the moment I'd have little knowledge of how.
Would you in principle fancy it? Because I mean, there's a rumour going around that you might be interested in the Scotland job. I know you're going to say, no, I'm not talking about it. It's disrespectful as a guy job.
No, and I wouldn't. No, at the moment, no. I'm not interested in it at the moment because I'm having time off and I'm no real intentions.
You've seen the performances in the Euros. Who'd want that?
Yeah, well, let's be fair. I think Scotland would probably look at ourselves as being disappointing if you look at it. We didn't play well in Scotland. No, we didn't.
David, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being so upfront, mate.
Thanks for inviting me in.
My pleasure. Upfront with me, Simon Jordan, is brought to you by William Hill. For new weekly shows, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find audio episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. 18 plus, please gamble responsibly.